Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this bad boy up, nearing 200 subscribers. Always appreciative for anyone that tunes into these videos. Last week, 2 weeks ago, did a 53-man roster prediction following minicamp. We kind of have this downtime between minicamp and training camp where it's like, man, what's really going on? What are the discussions that are being had? What's the dialogue? And I think there's some topics you can branch off with based around that 53-man roster. I know there was one position in particular that was maybe a point of contention for some, and I kind of was, texting a couple of my buddies about their thoughts on the 53-man roster, and then, one of the areas I want to zone in on today is running back, and talking with a couple of buddies, and both of them said they see the Packers keeping 4 running backs. They would prefer the Packers keep 4 running backs, and that's, of course, a position that when I did my 53-man roster prediction, emerging from minicamp, I only said 3, and there's reasons for it that I think are very, very justifiable. And along with that, you look at how the construction of the roster is coming together in some other spots, position-wise, that you may need more depth, you may need more pieces of the puzzle in place, you may need more options, versatility, things of that nature. I do believe what the Packers have going at running back, it offers them a luxury where they only need to keep 3, and that could change throughout training camp in the preseason. We'll kind of see how things mold together, but I do stand firm on that position that I think you ask how many running backs, and the answer that many are clinging to is 4, and it's because of the production and the value that those 4 running backs have. You're talking about Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, Emmanuel Wilson, and Chris Brooks, and 4 running backs who each excel in different areas, do things very well in different ways. They each kind of have their own way they go about their business. But I do think 3 is that number for the Packers, and I just wanted to dive more into that today. And for me, it starts with the head of the snake with Josh Jacobs. You're talking about a guy last year in Josh Jacobs who had 300 carries. 301. He was one of 6 running backs to tote the ball 300 or more times in the National Football League. So that's a very, very small list. When you talk about a bell cow running back, like more and more we're seeing teams kind of veer away from that idea. And Matt LaFleur, typically, like his scheme since coming over as the head coach for Green Bay years ago, kind of circulates around using 2 running backs. We saw it with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, and then we saw it with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And I do believe that most people would probably say, well, Aaron Jones was the 1, and then Jamal Williams was the 2, and Aaron Jones was the 1, and A.J. Dillon for those couple of years was the 2. But you look at touches, it wasn't as though Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon were getting just leftover bits that were, sitting on the counter. Like, they were getting good touches and good amount of carries, receptions, targets, things of that nature. So Matt LaFleur does typically prefer a 2-back system. And I believe last year the plan probably would have been Josh Jacobs as the feature back, and then trying to sprinkle in some Marshawn Lloyd, the rookie 3rd-round pick out of USC, who saw his rookie campaign derailed by a couple of injuries, and then when he was set to come back in the middle of November, he had appendicitis and was put on the shelf for the rest of the year. But Josh Jacobs he's different than the backs that Matt LaFleur has had, primarily Aaron Jones, from a carry standpoint, from a workload perspective. I was looking at numbers, and obviously the first one I brought up to you, right? Josh Jacobs had 301 rushing attempts last year. There were only 5 other running backs who eclipsed that mark, led by Saquon Barkley, who had 345. But within those 301, you see that there were 4 games just last year for Josh Jacobs where he had 25 or more carries. So again, 17-game sample size of a regular season. I don't know how many he had in the playoff game against Philly. I guess I can look that up. But Josh Jacobs had 4 games in the regular season. So about a fourth of the season, he had 25 or more carries. In Aaron Jones' career with Green Bay, which spanned, 6-7 years, he had 1 game. And this is not a knock on Aaron Jones. This all ties back to me believing that the Packers will keep 3 running backs instead of 4 coming out of training camp, as tough as a decision as that may be to decide sort of who the odd man out is. But you look at Aaron Jones' career, 7 years in Green Bay. He had 1 game. Not 1 season, not 1 stretch. He had 1 game with 25 or more carries. Josh Jacobs had 4 alone last year. The luxury of having a bell cow running back is that entering this year, would they like to lessen the workload a little bit for Josh Jacobs? Probably. You want him fresh. You want him ready for the postseason. Now, there were no signs of deteriorating play from Josh Jacobs. He was a workhorse from start to finish, and including in that playoff game against Philadelphia, there were not, you put up 10 points. few and far between were the bright spots on the offense in that playoff game against Philadelphia. But if you want to look at one, it was Josh Jacobs. So I think while you want to find more of a balance as far as like lessening the workload, keeping him more fresh for a postseason run that you hope to make this year, you do know in the back of your mind, if you're Matt LaFleur and you're Adam Stenavich, the offensive coordinator, we can lean on Josh Jacobs. We can rely on him. There are going to be games probably this year again where he has 25 or more carries, and that's just the kind of running back he is. And I think having that type of running back, the danger is you assume health and you hope health. You have to factor it into the equation because having a bell cow running back and then the potential of losing them for a stretch of the season could put a major hurting on your running back room. But assuming all goes according to plan for Josh Jacobs, and in that playoff game, where am I at here? That's the opener. I don't even see the playoff game on here. There it is. 18 carries, 81 yards, and a touchdown, 3 receptions, 40 yards. He had 21 touches in the playoff game, 4.5 yards a carry against a really good Philly defense. But 4 games, 25 carries or more in the regular season. Aaron Jones had one of those in his career. And so I think in past years, past iterations of what the running back room has looked like for the Packers under Matt LaFleur, it made more sense to keep maybe 4 running backs because it's like you have your thunder and lightning with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, but you want some depth to fill it out knowing that, hey, there is somewhat of a timeshare going on, and if you lose one of those guys, maybe you want more than one option to kind of carry the load or the bulk, should that be the case. And we saw A.J. Dillon deal with neck stingers and other injuries throughout his career and throughout his time in Green Bay, and it sucked. It sucked for him. It sucks for the player. It sucks for the team. I do believe you can go into this season assuming like Josh Jacobs has been pretty durable throughout his career, and you can expect him to get a heavy dosage again this year. He's missed 4 games. He's missed 5 games, 6 games. Let me see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. My count is he's missed 6 games in the last 5 years. Like, you can count on Josh Jacobs. I mean, as durable, as reliable as it gets. And so knowing that, you have a guy who, I don't know percentage-wise how we want to break it up, but if you want to say like, hey, Josh Jacobs gets 75% of the total touches that the running backs get for Green Bay this year, maybe it's closer to 80. I don't know. That's a lot. And then you start to wonder, like, do we have other areas elsewhere that could use an extra puzzle piece? And with running back, I would believe in an ideal world, Green Bay enters this year, Matt LaFleur, Stenavich, the rest of the brain trust. They enter this year thinking Josh Jacobs still a bell cow. He's still carrying that title, obviously the head of the snake. But, man, we want to pepper in Marshawn Lloyd. We got to see what we got. We used a 3rd-round pick on him. Injuries, again, took out his rookie season. We got to see what we got. Marshawn Lloyd and spurts is kind of a change of pace, potential home run hitter. He's more unorthodox and with his shiftiness. And I am pretty high on Marshawn Lloyd if he can stay healthy. And so he's a puzzle piece for you at running back. And then it really comes down to Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks. And I think I mentioned it in a video last week. Green Bay's going to have to decide, do you want the guy who's just a better true running back when it comes to carrying the ball in Emmanuel Wilson, a guy who looked like a running back too when he was asked to carry on a bigger workload at times the last couple of seasons, and he looked the part? Or do you want a guy in Chris Brooks who's a better pass protector at the running back position? You can use him on special teams. That'll make Rich Bisaccia smile ear to ear, and there's more versatility, more ways to use Chris Brooks. Or do you want the true runner Emmanuel Wilson? And the part that sucks about this is when I say I think the best route is Green Bay keeps 3 running backs instead of 4. I mean, Josh Jacobs is making any roster in the NFL. Marshawn Lloyd's making most rosters of the NFL. Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks are not slouches by any stretch of the imagination. Those 2 guys make most rosters probably in the NFL as a depth piece, right? As how the Packers incorporate and how the Packers use them as 3rd and 4th on the depth chart. But the numbers game and how this running back room is currently taking shape, the ideal scenario sees Josh Jacobs get the lion's share of the work, and then Marshawn Lloyd spell him at times, and then you have Emmanuel Wilson and or Chris Brooks. And I look at the Jair Alexander exit, and had Jair Alexander and the Packers found common ground on a restructure, I would have been way more open to the idea of you have Jair Alexander, Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs. Roll with 4 cornerbacks instead of 5. If there's an injury, maybe you have one, or maybe you have Kalen King, Micah Robinson. Maybe you have 1, 2, all 3 of them on the practice squad. Boom, call them up, so on and so forth. I would have been more open to the idea of keeping 4 cornerbacks. I think with the departure of Jair Alexander, it does leave some question marks at corner as far as I love Keyshawn Nixon. I like the addition of Nate Hobbs. Carrington Valentine's so damn good for being a 7th-round pick, man. He has turned out to be a true cornerback, a really good one in my opinion. But outside of those 3, there's question marks. And now if you have one injury, all of a sudden there's more unknowns, there's more uncertainty. And so I think keeping 5 cornerbacks on the 53-man roster instead of risking putting Kalen King or Micah Robinson on the practice squad or Haddon, and then they could get plucked up by another team. There's a bigger risk involved in that than keeping 3 running backs. I mentioned the numbers with Josh Jacobs already. It's a guy who you can rely on. And if you got to give him 30, didn't he have 30-some carries? I don't have the numbers in front of me. He had like a 30-carry game, I believe, against, was it Indianapolis or Tennessee? I think one of those Malik Willis starts. And so I think the luxury of what Josh Jacobs gives you from a workload perspective gives you some wiggle room and gives you some flexibility if you're Green Bay to say, look, let's just keep 3 running backs to start the year. If we need to add later on for depth or for something else, if someone goes down, that's fine. I'm looking at certain positions. I think on the final 53-man roster coming out of minicamp, I believe I kept 7 wide receivers, and I had said, like, there's a case for 8 and then 9 when Christian Watson comes back, and you're playing that numbers game again where it's like Romeo Doubs is making every roster in the NFL. Jaden Reed's making every roster in the NFL. Dontavian Wicks used a 1st-round pick on Matthew Golden, a 3rd-round pick on Savion Williams, and then you have Bo Melton, Malik Heath, Mecole Hardman, and those 3, that trio, is making most 53-man rosters in the NFL, but the Packers just have such an influx at wide receiver, such a large quantity that there's going to be 1 or 2 names that are left off the board that are probably scooped up by another team, whether that's, Hardman, Melton, Heath. I don't see all 3 of those guys making the 53-man roster, but I do think there's more of a case for Green Bay to say, let's keep 7 of these guys and then trim down and keep only 3 running backs instead of saying, man, let's keep 6 wide receivers and 4 running backs instead. Like, it wouldn't come down to just running back and wide receiver. But again, you add just 1 somewhere else, you're taking 1 away from another position. I'm not going to be stunned, shocked if Green Bay keeps 4 running backs because I think their room has 4 really valuable guys that, again, can give – it's not like Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks are like mirror images of each other. It's not really the case at all. Again, I mentioned Brooks is – I think Emmanuel Wilson is getting better as a pass blocker, but he's not Chris Brooks. And Chris Brooks can play special teams in certain ways that Emmanuel Wilson certainly can't, or at least hasn't shown the ability to, hasn't been given the opportunity that a Chris Brooks has. And so they're very different, and you would like that in most cases, right? Because it offers you a different look. It makes the defense prepare differently instead of saying, hey, these 2 guys are pretty, congruent to one another. Let's just, prepare for the same thing here. And so that can be enticing to say, let's just keep 4 running backs. I just go back to, if you keep 4 running backs, you're trimming up somewhere else, like potentially cornerback where I think you need 5, or defensive end where I think you need 6, because a lot's going to be put on the plate of Lucas Van Ness this year. And if he struggles early on, and again, there just hasn't been much in the sample size of his 2 seasons in the NFL that at this point leads many to believe, like, man, he's going to have a real breakout year. Now, Goody has said that throughout the offseason. The Packers are speaking highly of Lucas Van Ness, and he mentioned a thumb injury that, lingered and took away some of his abilities last year as a pass rusher, and that's fine and dandy, but I think you need numbers at defensive end. I think quantity blended with quality is the name of the game at defensive end in case a Lucas Van Ness struggles out of the gates, in case, Barron Sorrell, the rookie out of Texas, or Colin Oliver out of, where's he out of, Colorado State, in case they get limited opportunities but aren't really excelling in those roles. And then you have Kingsley Enagbari and Brenton Cox to fall back on instead of Brenton Cox Jr. or Kingsley Enagbari. So I see more value to keep 6 defensive ends and 3 running backs instead of 5 defensive ends and 4 running backs. So I'm just looking at it position by position, and that's why I say, and I know there's pushback on it because that word quality is there. Like, Chris Brooks should make a 53-man roster. Emmanuel Wilson should make a 53-man roster. With the percentage of touches that Josh Jacobs chews up in that backfield, you have an opportunity to say we can keep it trim at running back entering the season so we can be more sure somewhere else where right now we aren't as certain about. And Green Bay is going to say all the right things. Goody, LaFleur, none of these guys, Jeff Hafley, Stanovich, Bisaccia, they're not going to come out and say, yeah, we've got some pretty major concerns about, the quarterback room or what we're going to see at defensive end after we struggled to get to the quarterback on a consistent basis last year. Outside of the 2 games, what were they against Seattle and Tennessee. That was 15 of Green Bay's 45 sacks in 2 games. They're not going to come out and say that they're worried or pressing at certain positions, but those truthful dialogues that happen probably behind closed doors with members of that coaching staff, including LaFleur and Hafley and Bisaccia and Stenavich and so on and so forth, that's where you're going to really get the meat and potatoes of what's going on. We'll never be privy to those conversations, but that's where you're going to get them amongst each other saying, hey, I'd rather have 6 defensive ends than 5. I think we can keep 3 running backs. And, if it's Jacobs, Lloyd, Wilson as your 3rd running back, he's probably not going to see too many touches, right? Unless one of those guys goes down. And if that's the case, then keeping Brooks as the 4th just because he has versatility and can play a little special teams, it's just you're really stretching it out. And I like all 4 running backs. In an ideal world, if it was a 60-man roster, I have no reservation. I'm saying you're keeping 4 because Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks are so different from one another and what they offer and what they bring to the table. I just knew that was kind of a point of contention position with my 53-man roster, and I just wanted to clarify. And one more point with this that I think it cannot be forgotten. Savion Williams, your 3rd-round pick out of TCU. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar. I'm just so excited to see how Matt LaFleur uses him. And there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. There's a lot. Jacobs, Tucker Kraft, all those receivers. And now you're like, oh, Luke Musgrave is back from injury. Oh, Marshawn Lloyd's back from injury, right? Oh, we have 2 rookies, Matthew Golden in the 1st round, Savion Williams in the 3rd round. Savion Williams is listed as a wide receiver. He is a wide receiver. Savion Williams last year at TCU had 60 receptions and 51 rushes. He had 51 rushing attempts. They were on that frog package. He lines up at quarterback. He lines up at running back. He lines up at wide receiver. He'll line up anywhere. You can keep 3 running backs knowing that in-game, because I know here's the worry. The worry is you keep 3 running backs. Every game's a big game in the NFL, right? So I don't want to say if you're in a big game. The worry is you keep 3 running backs on the 53-man roster, and in-game, whether it's 1st quarter, 2nd quarter, whatever. The worry is Josh Jacobs goes down, and all of a sudden you're like, we've got Marshawn Lloyd and Emmanuel Wilson, or we've got Marshawn Lloyd and Chris Brooks. And you're like, we can manage. We can get by a game for this. The worry is the ultimate disaster scenario is you're in one of these, NFC North rivalry games, need the win, want to beat the rival, and 2 of these guys go down. You're like, we're on our last leg at running back. Savion Williams is the punch out the glass, push the emergency button option at running back. And it's not like, oh my God, he's going to have no idea what he's doing. 60 receptions, 51 rushes at TCU last year. You can put Jordan Love in the shotgun and attach Savion Williams to his left hip. You could put Jordan Love under center and have Savion Williams behind him as the running back. You can do it like how San Francisco did at times with Deebo Samuel. The other luxury, all the good things that you can bring to the table with Josh Jacobs, talking about he's going to chew up so much of the percentage of touches that the running back group gets. Do you really need to keep 4 when maybe you feel more comfortable keeping 5 corners instead of 4, 6 defensive ends instead of 5, 7 wide receivers instead of 6? The other angle to this is Savion Williams. Because disaster scenario says, what if you lose 2 backs in a game and there's still 2.5 quarters to go? That's like emergency situation. What's the fallback? Savion Williams can play running back. And I know it's not ideal, right? But you can line him up there for a game. And then you collect your thoughts afterwards. And then you figure out, the injury, severity, where we go from here. Do we have a running back on the practice squad? Is a Chris Brooks or Emmanuel Wilson out there on the market for us to pluck up and put on our 53-man roster? I don't think the worry is throughout the season, man, we have 3 running backs instead of 4. This is crazy. It's like the in-game 2 guys go down, then what? And I do believe the draft pick of Savion Williams, he gives you so much damn versatility that if you're truly in a bind, you could use him at running back. You could, right? Is it ideal? No, but losing 2 running backs in a game is typically doesn't happen, but that's your doomsday scenario with keeping 3 running backs on the roster instead of 4. And I say you would have Savion Williams. You want to line Jaden Reed up and, as a wide receiver in the slot and have him come in orbit motion or jet motion and give him a little jet touch pass and use him sort of as a running back but still a wide receiver for a game. If you have, multiple injuries at running back, go ahead. So I just think there's options elsewhere that would lead you to believe you can keep 3 running backs. And again, Josh Jacobs is going to get a lot of the touches. This isn't, we would see at times where Aaron Jones is out there for the first quarter, and then A.J. Dillon gets the whole second quarter, and then, halftime rolls around and Aaron Jones has 3 carries, and you're like, damn, why aren't they getting the ball? How many Packer games did you watch throughout the years where Aaron Jones had like 3, 4, or 5 touches at halftime, whether it's, 4 carries and a reception, and you're like, why isn't he getting the ball more? Well, there were so many games, especially that last year or the last couple of years when A.J. Dillon was healthy, when A.J. Dillon was on the team and healthy with Aaron Jones, where you'd get to halftime and Aaron Jones doesn't have any touches because Dillon played the whole second quarter, or the backup running back played the whole second quarter. Josh Jacobs is a different breed, man. Different breed. Again, 4 games last year with 25 or more carries. Just last year with the Packers, his first year in Green Bay. In 7 years, Aaron Jones had one of those games. We would have loved to see more of those games from Aaron Jones. It's just not how the Packers divvied out the usage at running back. Josh Jacobs is different. He's a true bell cow. And so I still circle back to all those ideas, all those thoughts, and I believe keeping 3 running backs instead of 4 is the way to go for the Packers. That could have fluctuated for me had Jair Alexander stayed in Green Bay. I would have felt a lot more confident about keeping 4 corners instead of 5 and rolling from there and putting Robinson, Kalen King, whoever else on the practice squad instead. Defensive end had Lucas Van Ness burst onto the scene last year. I would have said, man, I think you can keep 5 defensive ends. You have Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness. You drafted 2 rookies, and then maybe flip a coin for Brenton Cox or Kingsley Enagbare. But that didn't happen. And so now I'm like, I think you need 6 defensive ends. Because what if some of these guys are in a prolonged drought or they're just not getting to the quarterback? You need to be able to throw another option out there, and it's got to be more than 1. It's got to be more than 2 if you're Jeff Hafley. You have to give him more chess pieces on the board for that. And then wide receiver, I mentioned, there's just so many names. A couple of them are going to be cut. They're going to be like, damn, player in A and B didn't make the roster, but 7 of their wide receivers did, or 6 did. So I just look at running back as a position where it's like there's going to be a casualty there on the final roster that probably shouldn't have been a casualty because it's a numbers game. And the numbers game, it'll chew you up and spit you out. And so I do, at this point, still think Green Bay keeps 3. I think that's the magic number at running back. And the 2 locks to me are Lloyd and Jacobs, and in most situations I would say Brooks and Wilson are locks, but not with this roster, with how it's kind of taken shape. Let me know what you guys think. Always appreciative of all the support. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please click the subscribe button. We're trying to crawl up to 200 subscribers, getting pretty close. Always appreciative of all the support, everyone watching the videos. We'll see you next time.